All right, good afternoon, everyone. It is Tuesday, September 27th at 1 o'clock Eastern Time, and this is Advancement Live. I'm your host, Kim Brown, and on today's live broadcast, we're talking about enhancing the online giving experience. So we've all dealt with it. There's too many clicks, there's forms that aren't user-friendly, giving pages that don't match our brands, and it's something that we know can get better with the right different solutions that we're going to talk about on today's show. So Advancement Live is part of the Higher Ed Live network. It offers viewers direct access to the best and brightest minds in education, and live broadcasts allow viewers to share knowledge and participate in discussions around the most important issues in our industry. Today's live viewing experience is powered by Maestro, the premier marketing tech platform for broadcasters, and all episodes of Advancement Live are free. They're accessible in the video archives at higheredlive.com, and they're also in podcast format on iTunes. And today's episode is made possible by iModules. You can get the latest white paper from iModules to learn more about online giving trends in higher education, including 24-hour giving campaigns, crowdfunding, average gift size, and a whole lot more. Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a marketing and communications firm that works with education institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. So without further ado, I have three awesome guests with me today. I will tell you that Nick from George Mason University is having a little technical trouble, so Nick is going to be on mute until we allow Nick to speak. He'll unmute himself, and then he'll go back on mute. So Nick is the Director of Annual Giving at George Mason University. He's responsible for designing and implementing annual giving strategies for George Mason, and that includes oversight of direct mail, e-solicitation, their call center, their online giving site, which is the topic du jour, and we are excited to have Nick Herman joining us today. We also have Kate. Kate Jolly is Associate Director of Annual Giving at Purdue Research Foundation, and she focuses on, a perfect topic for today, e-philanthropy. Her main initiatives are email solicitations, Purdue's Day of Giving, online giving in general, and then Purdue's crowdfunding platform, which we'll dive into a little bit today. She is a Purdue graduate. And a man who needs no introduction if you've watched Advancement Live in the past. He's been our guest a few separate times. He is Mirko from iModules, Senior Account Manager and Client Consultant. And prior to that, he worked in the alumni engagement field, so he brings a great perspective to that as well. So thank you, all three of you, for joining us today. And I will start with Kate, and I'll let folks know that as this episode is going on, we will be taking questions. If you just tweet them using the hashtag HigherEdLive, I will monitor Twitter, and I can take questions or anything that you want to add to the conversation, any giving sites that you love, any tips or tricks that you have that have worked, all of those totally fair game. And we'll tweet out some good examples during the episode as well to the folks who were on today's episode, and then some other schools that really do giving forms and giving pages quite nicely. So Kate is in a room full of Purdue love right now. Kate, first tell us where you are.
I'm in the touchdown room, which is a room for alumni to be able to check their email while they're on campus, and it's filled with random assortments of Purdue memorabilia.
All right, awesome. So what have you guys done at Purdue to really, today is about enhancing that giving experience. So when you look at what Purdue has done, what sets your giving page apart, and what can people learn from you?
I think we've tried to make it very user-friendly for the donor and thinking about their experience rather than our experience. So we talk about them entering your information rather than calling them a donor, and really talking to them rather than talking to us, and then making sure it's exactly what we need, but in their terms, and not over asking them for information. And then when they click through different things, I can pre-populate their information, which is obviously very helpful and easier for the donor experience.
I'm going to tweet out the link to it now. I love the second you get there in huge lettering is about your amount to give. I mean, it's right there in front of your face when you visit your site. Was that a strategic decision? I know that's one of the questions later on in the episode, but about giving donation levels. Talk to me about what went into that.
Yeah, so when we launched with iModules in 2014, we did a lot of benchmarking with other institutions and then just looked across the board with other kind of nonprofits. and saw that giving buttons helped to maybe increase your average gift. So they're very strategic in the way that they're chosen. So at the time, our average gift was $225 online. And so naturally, you're drawn to select the middle number, which on our site is $250. And then the numbers then. So we actually saw an uptick in our average gift because people selected that $250 rather than selecting other and typing in $225.
Interesting. Mirko, is that something you see with a lot of your clients, that they will choose to give those giving buttons, those giving levels on their forms?
It's something we're seeing more and more of. So I would say within the last year or two, and I think that's sort of when Purdue started doing it. But yeah, it's an increasing number of clients. There are other ways to do it as well. Some clients give multiple options in email communications and then link directly to the form from email. So, but I think I really like the concept, because to your point, Kim, immediately you're presented with how much do you want to give. And when somebody gets to your giving site, they already have an idea of what they want to give generally. So they can put that information in first and then worry about all of their contact information, personal information, and so forth. It just makes that process a little bit smoother for them, and to Kate's point, more constituent friendly in my view. The other option that we have seen some institutions take, and one example is Carnegie Mellon, which I think you have a link for as well, Kim, to tweet out. But when you get to their giving form, the first thing they present are some designation options. So they've taken the approach that the message we want to give is that donors can tell us immediately what type of fund they want to support. And in their case, it's like a general fund, unrestricted, or a general scholarship fund, and I think then they have an other option. But so I think those are the two possible approaches that we see more and more of, rather than taking people right to that giving form. It's either having the dollar amount buttons or something like Carnegie Mellon, where there are some designation options. Both of those personalize the giving experience more than somebody just going to a blank form.
So I'll ask a question now for Nick, and then have Nick unmute to give us his answer. George Mason University is similar to what Mirko was just explaining, which is where the designations are front and center when you visit your giving page. So Nick, kind of talk us through GMU and what sets you guys apart, and the decision to do the designations versus the actual giving amounts.
Yeah, sure. So what we've done is and we've had a lot of iterations of our giving form over the last couple of years. When I came on board, we were in the process of implementing our iModules giving form. We've made some changes, and we've gone back and forth, actually. We haven't ever had designations out front. We've always kind of focused on just a self-entered form, a blank form for the designation amount. The designations themselves, however, are very much out front, and we've put them even more out front recently in the last 6 months or so. We've added our 4 highest level priority buttons at the top, and then all the other options, if you want to see them, the 200 other designations are in the pop-up box. And we think that worked for us because the 200 designations is a lot for the donor to cycle through. It also created, we thought, we think there's some issues we're having with others. So we're actually probably changing around our giving form quite dramatically, where we're going to try to filter folks into custom versions of giving forms, because Mason is a really, it's a broad institution with lots of program schools and colleges and a lot of diversity. And so instead of trying to program our giving form as a one-size-fits-all, we're going to try to break it down and be more donor-centric. And that's really kind of what we've tried to do with our giving form as a whole. We've gone from a multiple page to primarily a one-page format. We're just trying to make sure that what we're doing is for the donor, and that wasn't always a big part of our decision-making process.
So they can write in other on your
form.
They can. Does that get crazy?
We've had a couple. I'm not going to blow it out of proportion. Some people think it's extreme, but we've had a couple folks who just aren't really aren't able to clearly understand how to use the other, when the other is an option inside the pop-up box, and when there are so many options in the pop-up box, to click to open the pop-up, find the other button, and then click back out and leave a note as to what that other was. We've had some confusion, and so that helped partially drive our decision to change our giving form up a little bit too. I don't think it's the biggest issue, but some people have had issues.
All right, I'll have you mute and we'll come back to you. So we know, they've we're assuming that they've gotten to this giving page, that they've found it somehow. They might have gotten a mailer about it, or they found a link on Twitter. But what about when they're visiting your main alumni website or your main university website? And Kate, we'll start with you. How important is it to have that donate now or give now? And why do you think that some institutions struggle with getting folks to head to that, or institutions, charities, whatever it is, organizations, with actually putting that button where people can find it?
Right. I think, we still experience that sometimes here still at Purdue. We on our giving page, giving.purdue, we have a Give Now up at the top and the top nav, and then also in the footer, just so wherever they are on the site, they can access the Give Now button. I've seen, I know our John Purdue Club has a sticky button that scrolls with you, which is really nice. But I think on our main Purdue homepage, it's always been a struggle to get the Give Now. We finally have a Give kind of in the upper toolbar, but the main homepage has tile. And we normally put a tile on there during the months of November and December because those are very hot months for donations, but we aren't able to have a button there always because giving isn't the top of their priority. It's admissions, it's other things. So I think always trying to make a case is very good. So I think we've made a case for November and December, but being able to try to make a case for more on. We've also kind of bridged the gap with our giving day and bridging the gap with being able to put a giving message on social media on the main Purdue platforms. Our giving day was the first time that people had ever done that at Purdue. So building the gap other ways helps them to learn about having giving in almost everything, because everything you can relate back to giving. I know we just, a couple of months ago, Purdue solved the Zika virus, and no one thought to put in a giving link into the press release because that was an afterthought. It was about research, but they still need funding to finish and find the cure for it. So always thinking the full circle rather than just one step ahead.
That's a phenomenal example. And to us, in our world, it seems like a no-brainer, but you're right. To folks who are writing those press releases, to the researchers themselves, maybe it's not top of mind. Nick, what's your experience been with getting that, to kind of permeate the George Mason University culture as opposed to just living within your giving properties? Oh, don't forget to unmute. Oh, no, we still have you muted, Nick.
Can you hear me? Thank you. I was going to say, I think we've actually done pretty well with that. If anything, where we struggle is consistency with verbiage. Most of our sites have give buttons, but they are join, contribute, support, make your gift, give now. And so we're working on building some consistency. We're fairly obviously located on most of our sites. That is still a work in progress. But we're getting better. We're trying to build that expectation. And I think as before it was stated, it helps to find something that helps bridge the gap sometimes to help get some buy-in, to open kind of some minds to the fact that fundraising should be at the forefront of much of what the university is doing. And a give button is just an example of that, honestly.
What word do you think works best?
I'm a big fan of commands. Make your gift, give now. I'm fine with the other one. I don't like donate or support, really. I like a pretty strong ask.
Mirko, does iModules have a recommendation for clients on that front?
I'm sorry, I heard part of that question, Kim. Can you just
sorry, it's the Nick Herman echo. Does iModules have a recommendation for clients on that front? Give now, support, donate, make your gift. Because we struggle with that internally. What is the best phrase? I wonder if there's been any research done either on your end or elsewhere on what does elicit the most clicks.
So I think the key thing is what Nick mentioned. It's that call to action. So you don't want something that doesn't resonate with the audience or where they're not sure what they're going to. So for example, support I'm not a big fan of because that could be IT support. For example. So you always have to take a step back and think about how your broad-based constituency is going to interpret whatever term you choose. So personally, I'm a big fan of what the two Nick mentioned, give now or make a gift. It's very clear what the action item is there and what you're asking people to do. But that may not work for every constituency. So I think it has to be somewhat school specific, but again, just taking that step back and looking at whatever verbiage you're using from the perspective of somebody who knows nothing about what you're trying to achieve. And I think that's sometimes where universities or institutions struggle a little bit.
So while we have you talking, Mirko, what is the, or how important is it, and how do you work with clients on making sure that that giving form that they're taken to actually matches the brand of the overall university look, so that you feel like you're actually giving to Temple when you give to Temple, or giving to Carnegie Mellon when you give to Carnegie Mellon? Can you talk about that a bit?
So I think it's hugely important. Again, put yourself in the constituent mindset, and if somebody's on your EDU site or on your alumni site or your development advancement site, and they get to a giving form, and the giving form looks very different from the site that they just came from, the first thing that's going to cross their mind is this even a site for this institution? Am I even going to give to this school, or is this something completely different? So especially for the giving process, it's important to avoid anything like that. So any potential where a constituent is going to take a step back and question whether this is right, or have to think about how to respond to a question or a field on the form, that should be avoided at all costs, because the likelihood is that the constituent won't then take the action. So if they see a giving form that looks different than the page they just came from, they're probably not going to go through and make an online gift. If you're lucky, they might pick up the phone and call your office or put in a mailed gift, but most likely you may have lost that opportunity to get that gift. Same thing if your form has 50 fields on it, or whatever it may be, or if you're asking for information that you don't need for them to make a gift. So employer name is important, but employer address, city, state, probably not as important on a giving form. Or spouse information, again, there's some relevance, but I've seen some schools that ask for a ton of information like that, and it just makes that process so much more arduous and so much longer that they're likely losing donors before they commit to making a gift. So those are all things that have to be kept in mind.
You probably don't want your donors to have to go to Google as they're filling out your giving form. Like, what's my work address again? No, hopefully they don't have to Google their spouse's name, but there's some things that they might have to look up. And you're right. And that kind of leads into my next question, first for Mirko, and then I'll pop over to Kate. Getting rid of all those clicks. Like, okay, I've clicked give now. I've told you I want to give. And then you're making me click again. And then you're making me click another time. So how do you start to eliminate those? Like, what can you cut first to make the process more seamless and easier for your donors?
So I think the first thing to look at is to make sure that that call to action takes somebody right to the giving form.
Right.
So I've seen some of the schools that we work with, or even other institutions, they have a give now, and then they go to another page explaining why you should give. Again, from
the what I want to give.
Right. They've said they want to give, so you don't need to convince them anymore. So that's sort of step one of that process. And then it really is critically looking at your form and seeing what fields you absolutely need to collect information on and what fields may not be nearly as important or you can eliminate. In terms of the one click, I sort of have two minds in that, because when we think about mobile giving, you also don't want a form that's pretty long on mobile, because then people have to scroll. So with so much of what we do now being mobile, actually we've seen more institutions go to multiple step forms to make it easier to give on mobile than having one long form that people have to scroll down in. But again, as long as it's clear on the form how many steps there are before they can finish making their gift, as long as the fields are clear, I think that's the most important thing, not so much anymore that one click, other than making sure that that click takes them to the giving form.
Kate, would you agree? I'm just going through Purdue's, I'm about to give $50 to Purdue just for the purposes of checking through your website. Would you agree that, as people go mobile, it's okay that they have to click as long as it's clear, or what's the philosophy at Purdue?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at ours is laid out in 4 easy steps, and it's shown at the top that you can see that, so you know where you are in the form and that you're close to being done. And then like Mirko said with the clicks, so if you're on our main Purdue page, you go to the general giving form, and then if you're clicking from, say, School of Mechanical Engineering, if you click their Give Now button, it leads you to a form of School of Mechanical Engineering funds. And so there you are, even maybe less clicks because you have already selected the fund by clicking on the mechanical engineering page. And then like he's saying with mobile, we are drastically seeing so many people opening our emails on mobile devices. So then being able to use the feature that iModules has of pre-populating their information even makes it easier on the donor experience on mobile.
Yeah, I think that's hugely important that their information is already in there when they go to make the gift. And I think that hopefully as that becomes more mainstream, we'll see that a lot of schools are going towards that because it really is so much easier for the donor. Nick, I'm going to ask about George Mason, and we talked a bit about how you have designations really front and center on your site. Is there any disagreement perhaps at your university about the 4 that are chosen to be highlighted, and how, because we think as we go into a giving day, as we go into really ramping up our fundraising efforts here, how do you decide who gets to be front and center, who gets top priority?
Yeah, that's a good question. We haven't had a ton of disagreement. I would say many of my colleagues in the units don't love that they feel like their designations are a little bit buried under those 4 priority funds. We are making some changes to address that. As I stated earlier, we're kind of like they just at Purdue, where if you're on a college's website and you click Give Now, you're not going to be directed to that giving form, that main giving form anymore. You're going to be directed to a custom version of that form with funds that make more sense, we think, to that donor. So I think that's helped assuage any kind of conflicts there. But it wasn't ever too big of an issue, but it really creates, it necessitates buy-in from the highest levels. It can't just be me. It's senior staff and fundraising that are saying, these are our top priorities, and so this is why these things are there. You need the support from the top.
Is that a monstrous undertaking to do the custom forms for the different units?
It hasn't really been too bad. I think we're going to end up with we're going to have a lot more links to very different forms out there. But Kelsey's been really great at putting all those together. The only issue that we have really kind of run into is some of our larger schools can't decide, because we want to limit the funds because they're not coming in a pop-up box anymore. We don't want to have 40 funds on the sheet, just in a laundry list. That's kind of been the really only difficult task, is making sure we're creating forms that aren't cumbersome.
Mirka, what advice do you give to clients in terms of figuring out those priorities, or how do you, choose your top designations? It's those internal conversations that can sometimes be the most difficult when it comes to optimizing a giving form or making the experience better for your donor. So what are some tips and tricks you give to schools about fighting those battles, if you will?
Sure. So I think part of it is just education and making sure everybody understands why it's important to limit the number of choices. And again, coming at it from the donor and constituent perspective, look, somebody doesn't want to look at 30 funds because they won't find what they want, or they'll leave your form before they make a gift. So I think that's part one. And I think the other thing is a lot of schools do have 30 or 40 funds. Well, look at what donors have supported in the past year or 18 months or 2 years, whatever time period you want to use, and focus on those key funds that receive the most online support. I would venture to guess that if a school has 40 funds, 20 to 25 of those have received almost no online gifts, if not more. So then for me, the question becomes to that school, okay, so we have to limit your funds. You're willing to put some of these that have received no online gifts above these other ones? All right, that's your call, but here's what we see. So in a way, using data to assist you in the conversation with some of those units could be really helpful. It may still not convince them, but at least you have something to show that indicates that, hey, these are not funds that people care about. So let's not put them on the form.
Awesome. Well, I know, Kate, you mentioned as we started this call that you're key to working with the back end, the IT folks, or having you had an amazing staff person who you work with. So just some tips, we're front end, we're thinking about the user experience, but we have incredible IT folks who work with data, who love data, who really want to, make sure they're getting the most out of, what they're asking for from alumni. So any, tips on working with those folks who are actually building your form, who are actually making it look the way it does, Kate?
Right. I think when we first launched our form, we were all sitting in a room with our gift processing and our systems team and really deciding what needed to be on there is what is the bare minimum that you need to process the gift and going from there. Because that's really all that we need to ask from them. Why do we need all this other frilly stuff? We could ask them at a later date because you want them in and out of the giving form.
I was tweeting that as you were talking, so I'm putting that out on Twitter at this moment. Nick, how about you as you sat around with your team in terms of figuring out what goes on there and talking again to your gift processors and to the IT folks? I know Kelsey has been so helpful in your process.
Yeah, that's been a real issue for us. Our very first giving form with iModules was absolutely and very obviously designed by committee. We had gift processors and folks from IT and back end that played a big role in the decision making of what all was included, and that's been the 2-year kind of effort is to rein all of that in, which we've gotten better at. But I think that it's really important to make sure that your giving form is designed for the user and not yourself or not your gift processing team. And I think that's just what you have to keep in mind.
So you asked for donor information, and then I'm going to proceed here. Oh, it's not going to let me. It's so mad at me. I cannot proceed here because I haven't put anything in there. Are you asking for, the company addresses, things like that, or how have you simplified your process?
What we've been able to do is collapse boxes and make forms and fields not required. So in kind of where we've acquiesced a little bit and met in the middle is we'll still include some of the employment information, some of the information that really other people are really wanting, but those fields are no longer required and they're in collapsible boxes. So the donor may see them, and if they want to open them up and fill them out, that's fine, but it's not necessary and it doesn't prevent you from moving on.
Thank you. Mirko, is that what you're seeing from most of your client schools, that that's the way to solve it, where, okay, you can have that question on the form, that is important information, but let's not require it because that's easier on the donor?
Yeah, so I mean, if there are fields that your gift processing team is insisting have to be on the form, that's the next part of the conversation then. Okay, if we agree that this is absolutely necessary, then do we need to require this field? Do you need this information for everybody? And most often the answer is going to be no, except for first name, last name, email, class year, and possibly some other affiliation type thing. And obviously the billing information, which comes through anyway, is required. But yeah, that would be the second part of the conversation. The first part, to the extent that you can, I think it's questioning whether you even need the field on the form, which both Purdue and Mason have already done. And I know a lot of the schools we work with have those conversations regularly. But yeah, the requiring element is another way to get around it, as are the collapsible boxes. So anything to make your giving form look smaller, look shorter, is going to benefit the donor. If they see that, oh, wait, I do have a new address, or I do want my gift matched, and they can just click a button and see other fields they have to fill out, they're then making the choice to share that information. They're opting into the gift matching or whatever it may be. So for somebody who doesn't have an employer that matches the gift, the form looks a lot smaller. Again, length of form is really a key element, or number of fields. So yeah, a couple of ways to get around that. One other thing I just wanted to circle back with, Kim, when you were working on the Mason form, you got that error message about something being required. So that's another thing that every institution should have outside people do with their giving form, is have somebody who's never seen the form try to make a gift and see what happens with them. Now, you might not have put in a dollar amount or whatever, so it may have been an obvious thing, but you'd be surprised the number of times that there's a field that's required that nobody sees because of where it's located on the form or whatever it may be. And the only way you get that feedback is to have outside people try to make a gift on your form, not people in your team who've been working on the form for months or who know the form by heart.
That's really smart. I mean, mine was just mad at me. I didn't do anything, so that was totally just me trying to run through. You should see the number of errors that are in front of me right now. But I mean, it's great advice to have. You're so close to it, and you work with it every day. So having someone, I mean, I would test this on my mother. Like, you know, she's a 60-something iPhone user. See how it works for her, and then you'll know, you know, if these are your donors, if this is where they're at, and they're using their iPhones and they're using their droids and things like that, you know, you want to make sure that it works for that population. Mirko, I'm going to ask too, and then I'll go to Kate and then to Nick. Do you think we're going to get to the stage where giving to your college or university is as easy as a Venmo transaction? My brother thinks that I'm so not cool because I don't use Venmo, but apparently it's where all the kids are at these days, where really it is like a one-click gift. Do you think we're getting there, or we're still, you know, a few years away from something like that?
So I think we're moving in that direction. I don't think we're quite there yet. Also, in part because of your constituents. I mean, you have people who are 21 who graduated to people who are 90 who are making a gift on your online form, maybe 80. So I mean, there's such a range, and you have to try to have a form that works for everybody. So I think that's the challenge. It goes along with your website as well. I mean, you have so many different constituencies that you're trying to please and convince to take an action that you can't go in one focused direction because you'll lose somebody else. So will we get there? Most likely, yes. But I think it is definitely a couple of years away. But everything we're seeing is making that giving process much easier in whatever way possible. So somebody mentioned pre-populating the form information. You can include an amount on the giving form through an email link. You can include somebody's past designation that they supported. So at that point, you have it down to them getting to the form, putting in the gift amount. Well, actually, you can populate that. So them getting to the form, saying next step, and putting in their credit card, and they're done, which is not quite to the degree of Venmo, but it's definitely getting there.
Kate, would you agree, or what are you hearing from, I mean, your specialty being in e-philanthropy, what are you hearing from, you know, you don't want to pigeonhole, but millennials who really are they don't even, any clicks is too many clicks. Like, I just want to send you my money. Like, what are you hearing from that population?
I must be your one millennial who doesn't use Venmo because I have not registered or used it yet. But I think that is going to be a problem, like Mirko mentioned, of some people using it and some people not, because if I don't want to have an extra login that I have to remember another password or anything like that, where this is simpler to just see the form, have everything populated and in and out. I think there's still a lot of things that are going to be needed, and so you're never going to be a one-click. Venmo can't determine where I want to give, where the giving form, obviously we can pre-populate it. So I think those are going to be the steps. It's almost like a merge of Venmo and the giving site.
Nick, any thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, I would just reiterate what Kate was saying. It's tough for organizations like ours to be able to go down to something as easy as Venmo, because there are just certain questions we have to know. We have to know that we're making sure we accredit gifts to the right people, that we're designating their gifts the way they want. So I think our goal, and the way I see it, is making sure that whatever form we do have works the best and the easiest for that donor. And that's just kind of the direction we're trying to go.
Great. So let's talk about, we've talked about getting them to the page. What happens after they've actually made that gift? They've said, I'm giving my $200. I just upped my gift to Purdue. I'm giving my $200 to Purdue. I've submitted my, gift. What comes back to the donor at that point? And Kate, I'll start with you and then go to Nick, and then Mirko, just talk about what you see from the majority of your clients. So Kate, after they've made their gift, it's all processed. What do they get an email right away? Do they get a thank you tweet? What happens next?
Yeah, there is an on-screen confirmation that shows that they completed the form, and I think we switch out a impact story of some sort on that confirmation page as well. I think it's hard for us because not all of our units or places that you can give to have students, so showing a student story isn't applicable to everyone. So just making sure that it's kind of impact statements like that. We're working on getting social sharing icons on there to share that you made a gift. We've seen great success with that with our giving day. So utilizing that on our normal online giving. And then they do receive an automatic email, which serves as their tax receipt. Purdue is a centralized but decentralized organization. So centrally we handle just kind of the facts and figures, and then we leave it to our units to do the warm and fluffy of more of the impact, where we just kind of get the nitty gritty done.
Great. Nick, how about you guys?
Yeah, our process is actually fairly identical to that. So they go through the confirmation page, they get an immediate email that is kind of that confirmation just form, very formal, just detailed, and they receive an email from our vice president of the foundation, the president of the foundation, and then stewardship really primarily happens at the unit level, so it varies based on the college and the unit. It could be postcards, letters, or they could just be online only.
Interesting. Mirko, is there anything that you're seeing, across clients, or something that tends to really work well, like what to put on that confirmation page, or how do you make sure they're going to come back and give another gift sometime? Like, what do you see?
So I think, first of all, the confirmation page you have to take some time and think about how to customize that. Mm-hmm. So you want a relatively short confirmation page, but to Kate's point, adding an impact story makes them think about, oh, okay, this supports why I decided to give to Purdue today, or whatever the institution. So you're already getting them into the mindset of, this is how my gift helped. So they're more likely to give again with that. And the same thing in the confirmation email, adding anything like that, any content like that is going to help. So that's a key thing to think about. Also, in the confirmation email, adding branding, to make sure that it's clear that's from the institution and it doesn't just look like a Word email or a plain text type email. Adding a signature from the vice president or whoever is sending that email, again, that's something that helps. So all of those little details make a difference in the end of that donor experience. And then thinking about stewardship and making sure there is, in most cases, some kind of stewardship follow-up, whether that's just an email 3 or 5 days after they made a gift, thanking them for the gift, and again, sharing an impact story, or whether it is a print piece that's either a receipt or a follow-up thank you. Anything like that is going to help, and most likely help in how they perceive the process of making a gift, thereby making it more likely they'll support the institution again.
Would you agree with Kate about the social sharing icons? And I know we're about to do, hopefully, we will do our first giving day in March, and how important it is to have that social share component. I made a gift, now it's your turn.
Absolutely. So, I think there's more relevance for your giving days and your very focused campaigns that are all about peer-to-peer and peers getting the word out. So their social sharing is critical, but there's absolutely no reason why you can't have that option on all of your confirmation steps for giving, and just encourage people to share throughout the year that they supported the institution. There's no downside to that at all. And even if only 1% of the people take advantage of it, that's 1% more than you would have had talking about making a gift to your institution if you don't give them that option.
That's so true. Do any of you, Kate, I'll start with you, and this might be difficult, but do you have any stats on, how things changed when you really took a hard look at your giving form, when you made those changes, when you made it easier for your donors? Do you have any stats about that?
Right, I actually tried to pull some this morning, and it's really hard. So before we implemented, our form was just very cumbersome and absolutely miserable. And I think before we didn't really promote it. We did only emails at calendar year end, where now we're doing a lot more digital. So I don't necessarily think it's apples to apples when we talk pre our iModules form and then post. But I do know that online giving from fiscal year 15 to fiscal year 16 has drastically increased in just annual giving efforts. So our central campaigns, online giving has gone up $1 million in annual giving efforts, and then under 25,000 all gifts across the university has gone up 3 million. So we now have personal URLs for all of our directors of development, so that they can pre-fill maybe their college's funds on there, and then they have a direct URL to send to donors. That has helped them in the process of getting some major gifts to make annual level gifts throughout the years, and not just major gifts.
That's it. That's huge numbers. Congratulations. That's fantastic.
Just kidding.
Yeah, no, that's great. Nick, anything on your end in terms of when you sat around and had conversations?
Yeah, so we're a little bit in the same boat. Our stats are a little bit difficult to compare. But what we're really doing is making sure we use the reporting and the statistics that we can draw now off the giving form that we have now to make better decisions for how we're going to change or implement some ideas. And part of that is driving some of the changes we're making now. It comes down to getting rid of designations that aren't being used, make sure we're focusing on things that are right for the donor. And how we're using custom giving links and emails and trying to drive traffic to our forms. And so using the data that's available to us now to make decisions that are better for the future is kind of the most important things for us.
Awesome. Mirko, anything to add on that front?
Yeah, I would just say the stat that Kate mentioned, or a stat like that, I think is important to measure. So I think a lot of institutions are looking at giving globally, and they're not breaking it out into what percentage is online giving. And I think that's a key element to think about. So not only dollars that are coming in online compared to overall totals, but also number of gifts coming in online compared to overall totals. And to track that year over year and to see how your online giving is changing compared to your print communication and everything else that you're trying to do compared to Phonathon. Because online is becoming such a large component of giving and so important a component that if you have those stats, you might decide to dedicate more time to e-solicitations or to digital solicitations than if you didn't have those stats. So I think if there are institutions who aren't tracking information like that, I'd encourage them to do that because I think it'll help in planning for future campaigns.
Kate, have you seen that, your uptick in online giving, has that changed the strategy around, direct calling, around, your telefund?
We're actually doing some testing with our mailers this year with people who trying to talk to people how they gave. So looking at people who in the past have given via online channels and maybe soliciting them via online channels instead of sending them mail. So we're looking at that a lot more this year. I know we're just getting ready to send our fall renewal piece, and for people who are receiving it by mail, if their last gift was online, we're not putting a remail envelope, we're just putting an online link to go to our form. So I think I'm really interested to see how that works and if it then helps save cost of like postage and stuff for everyone else.
Awesome. Nick, anything on your end on that front, how it might have changed telefund?
Yeah, a little bit. We started a process like that last year where we contact all of our live bunts in the same channel as they gave most recently. So we try to, not that we'll not attempt them across all channels throughout the course of the year because those donors matter to us, but we'll try to focus in time frames of where they traditionally make gifts and in channels of where they and how they traditionally make gifts. And so whether that's online with emails, through the call center or through direct mail, we try to go at them in that way. The only other thing I would add is we've gotten pretty good at tracking kind of where and how gifts are made. We make prolific use of appeal codes and custom URLs and links, which helps us to determine kind of be doing. And we know that about 20% of all of our gifts that come through online are semi-organic. They're usually people that are either typing the link right into the URL, they're getting it off a direct mail piece, or they're Google searching and getting there. They're not coming through a link that we've provided, which helps us, make some decisions about how we want to use our form. And so I think it's just important to always use whatever data you have at your fingertips to try to make sure you're going after donors in the most appropriate ways and trying to get them online to give.
Kate, I'll ask one more question before we conclude. I noticed on your giving page, I can make a one-time donation, a recurring gift, or a sustaining donation, which I have not seen that language before, and that could be, I don't explore giving pages on a daily basis, so they could be out there all the time. But tell me the difference between recurring versus sustaining and what kind of traffic you've seen on both options.
Right, so reoccurring has like a specific end date. So if I want to give $5,000 over 5 years, it has those dates where sustaining will go on in kind of perpetuity, and I guess rather until your credit card expires. We are really trying to hit hard this fiscal year with reoccurring, especially with like a reoccurring campaign later this fiscal year. So our Don Purdue Club utilizes it a lot, and they see great success. I think reoccurring is going to be a really big thing for millennials because it sounds so little but can really add up. So I think we're going to be moving that direction altogether. of $5 a month, $10 a month, and that's how you're going to get people to upgrade. And I think that's what we're looking at a strategy with, to utilize that, because it doesn't sound like that much from the solicitation, but in the end, we're gaining a lot.
Awesome. Well, as we come up on 1:45, you all are the experts, so I want to make sure I haven't missed anything that you wanted to touch on during today's episode. Really good stuff, just simple things that maybe we don't think about, but also, thinking strategically about what is the call to action on your website. How are you making sure that when you're sending out a press release about great research that was done on a Zika virus, that there's your call to action, for a gift to promote future research. So, we can all learn something from that. But anything I missed? Or that you want to conclude with?
So I think the one thing that comes to mind that we haven't talked as much about is working with your alumni team as well. So one, obviously, to make sure that giving call to action is on all of your alumni pages, but also when we talk about events, we've seen some schools have tremendous success adding a donation ask to every event registration. And that's not something that historically alumni offices have done, but it's something we're increasingly seeing. Again, we have some great stories from some schools that have done this on every single event, whether it's a paid event or a free event, and are getting great gifts from just that additional soft ask at the bottom of the event registration form. When you think about the constituent process, especially for a paid event, they already have their credit card out. They're already going to give you their credit card information. It's just one more thing to add $20 to the total. So again, I think that's something that's well worth talking with your alumni teams about, and seeing if there's an opportunity to partner with them and at least put that question on a lot of your online event registrations.
It's a great point. We did it for our homecoming this year, first time ever. It was great. Awesome. Well, Nick and Mirko and Kate, thank you all so much for spending this time with me. Really informative episode, and something, this affects all of us, and I really appreciate you spending your Tuesday afternoon. And thanks, of course, to iModules and M. Stoner, the sponsors of this episode. And we will see you on the next one. Thanks, everybody.